I'm continuing to shine a light on the absolute heroes of music, guys like Peter Rowan and Bill Keith, who learned under the father of bluegrass, Bill Monroe, cats like Calvin Keyes and Early Ellie, who played the R&B circuit with Ray Charles. Maybe it's bassist Norbert Putnam, riffing what it was like to play in the studio with an original rocker like Elvis Presley, or Peter Erskine's countless tales from his relentless tours with Stan Kenton. I'm trying to stretch the lineage of American music through stories of wisdom from those who have learned from the masters. My show has continued to bridge the musical gap between my elders and my contemporaries. My guest today is one of my peers, and even though he has many, many chapters left to write in his career, I feel like he recognized early on that there was an urgency to creation and to create the highest art, and no genres of music, but just going for it, playing beyond what he knew, and getting to a place of the Matrix, as Reggie Workman talked about getting with Roy Haynes before he went with Elvin and Coltrane. But I look at this musician, my guest, as a very important conduit, as a bridge to future generations of music. Dave Harrington, welcome to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hey, man, happy to be here.
Really an honor to have you, man. It's been a long time coming. Can you just talk about, if that's a fair statement to make, that, I don't know, people sit on their art a lot because of technology and trying to perfect something. And I kind of wanted you to talk about your philosophy, especially early in your life, as it related to just creating, constantly creating with intention only and no judgment.
Well, I liked what I appreciate the generous introduction. And I also like what you said about playing beyond what you know. It's that to me is something that's always been at the forefront of my mind for various reasons. I was having a conversation recently with someone about just kind of a classic conversation about favorite guitarists or something.
Sure.
And I was reiterating a line I've said a few times about how many of my favorite guitarists don't make it sound easy. And they are playing exactly what you described, playing beyond what they know. You can hear
Exactly, dude. That's music, man. That is going for it, you know?
Yeah, 100%. You can hear them thinking. You can hear them
Oh.
trying stuff out. You can hear them making honest mistakes when you listen to live recordings. It came up. This sounds like I backdoored into a humble brag, but it came up because I just remembered why I was talking about this. Because a couple of weeks ago, I was up in the Bay with my jam band, Taper's Choice.
Dude, I
And
got a great story. Remind me to tell you this great story that just went down last Friday about that band. Go ahead.
okay, please.
Yeah.
And I won't take you through the whole thing, but one thing led to another. And before I knew it, we had care of our bass player, Alex Bleeker. We had procured Jerry Garcia's alligator guitar for the set for
Yeah.
me to play.
Oh man.
And so someone was asking me about how did that go? And then we started talking about guitar players, and I started talking about Jerry. And I was saying that like I was, I went in just thinking like I'm gonna play Jerry's guitar and we're gonna see how it goes. And usually when people borrow that guitar, it makes the rounds, and there's some really nice folks who run a nonprofit called Grateful Guitars Foundation, and
Sure.
they raise money for music and education, and they loan it out, and somehow it ends up in my hands. And usually when people play it, they trot it out and they play I Know You Rider, and they skip China Cat, or they do like a nice version of Ripple, and then they take it off and they send it back. But I just said that if it was okay, I'd like to play it for the whole gig just to see what it's like.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
So I played it for the whole show, and And I made some mistakes, you know.
Sure.
It was harder to play some of our music on Jerry's guitar than on my usual guitar. But I wouldn't trade the clams for the journey.
Dude, the client, I want you to talk about that, man. How did you get comfortable with that mindset? The amount of cats, the cats that I love, the road dogs that are on, not all of them, but when I get backstage after a gig or something, they're all like caught up in the mistakes that they made. And yet the clams, if you're in it, it kind of all depends on the music you're playing, but the clams are a gateway to new vocabulary, man. And I just wanted you to talk, even if you wanted to talk about how you became comfortable being uncomfortable.
I mean, I think there's a few things. I mean, I think it starts from a place for me because when I was growing up, when I was studying music, when I was serious in a different way, I was a upright bass player and an electric jazz bass player. And my mission in life from the time I was 11 or 12 until about my mid 20s was that I was going to be the next Jocko or the next Buster Williams or the next Ray Brown or something.
Yeah.
And that didn't really pan out. I ended up becoming a guitar player because I ended up answering a call and joining a band. And then that band turned into another band. And then I kind of woke up one day in my late 20s and realized that I was a guitar player now. So I have a kind of unprecious relationship with the instrument because even when I was a bass player, you know, so many of my influences were guitar players and organ players. And then when I got the chance and eventually became, mostly a guitar player, I think that there's holes in my education, there's holes in my skill set, but I also kind of sidestepped a bunch of like maybe baggage that I had already accrued on the bass I can't really hold myself to, I choose not to hold myself to that standard. Um,
Right, right.
and
I mean, I want you to know, this is so important. Did Jonko play the upright, by the way? I'm not really, I thought he was just an electric.
I don't think yeah, I mean,
I
I
mean,
read.
I know he pulled out, all I'm saying is Ray Brown. I mean, maybe Harrington would have been like a studio shark back in the 70s, like playing dates and things like that. But what was it about what baggage came with the upright that basically was like, I want to enjoy my life, my musical life. I don't want it to be a drag.
Well, I mean, I really thought that I was going to enjoy life as a bass player,
Sure,
and I did, and I had a lot more. I have a lot more technical like capability on the instrument, when I practice to this day. But I was also like, I was into like O'Teal and Les Claypool and Victor Wooten and all kinds of stuff and Phil, of course, when I
right,
was in high
right.
school. And so I was always interested in the outer realms of, what the role of the bass could be. And I think for me, mostly I think, I think if I can thread the needle, the, I, I like to let the stream take me where it wants to take me. I don't approach the music from like a long game or an in the moment perspective with a lot of agenda.
Sure.
Um, I've tried to really absorb the teachings of Derek Bailey about, you're making this music in this moment, and that's what the project is. And I think that same thing extends to so many people, of course, Jerry and, Miles and all of my great touchstones. But I think part of it is that I was getting the message that I should be playing guitar, and so I just went with it. And then I tried to become the guitar player that I wanted to be based on being very comfortable, you know, swimming in the slipstream of my influences and letting that be its own kind of study, and not being, and my influences are people who are not technical, per se, or not technical first, people who are lyrical, like Jerry or Miles or Frizzell or Schofield, or Mark Ribot, or
Sure.
Derek Brooks for that matter. But I think that how I've gotten to that place, to kind of go back 3 steps to your question of like
Yeah,
being,
yeah.
being comfortable with the clams,
Yes.
um, is practice. But it's practice in gig and
Yep.
practice on stages. And um, when I became a guitar player playing in Nicholas Jar's touring band, and then he and I started a band called Dark Side. And we played a lot of shows, like a lot of shows. We did a lot of touring between like 2011 and 2014, 15. And I had Road Dog guitar boot camp. And when I got back from all that, I resettled myself in New York and just tried to throw myself into the downtown milieu that I had grown up going to see, and sneaking into clubs to see people like Ilhan Ersahin and Sex Mob and Peter Applebaum, and all of that scene, the Medeskis and your John Zorns, and that whole world that I was really obsessed with, when I was in high school and college and now. And I just started playing shows a lot, and playing shows that were all improvised. And
Yeah.
that just kind
So
of
sick.
became
So
the thing
sick. So
that
sick.
I did. Um, I became friends with Ilhan, and he played in my band and I played in his band, and we started something that seems like a band. And we would never rehearse. I think maybe we rehearsed one time before we did like a 3-date tour in Brazil a couple of years ago. Like
Wow.
we would just show up and play, and I just did that so much as a choice because it was the next thing in the stream that was welcoming me into the music, and I said yes. And then if you do that enough, for me it's only fun if you can just let it happen and drift away. And
Yes.
for
Yes.
improvised music, like, game tape or looking backwards is just not what I do.
I mean, that, first of all, how often do you use the phrase swimming in the slipstream?
I
I
don't
mean,
know.
that might be, I'm going to take that. That is the greatest line of poetry I've heard in a long time. But I mean, this is really emboldening. I mean, in terms of playing Jerry's guitar, and in terms of not that you're the leader of that. I mean, maybe you are the leader of Taper's Choice. Which, I mean, I just have to tell you this story, which is just so cosmic. Because I was out in
I mean, I
LA.
should say we are
Yeah,
very much a democracy. We all bring
exactly.
some,
No, I dig.
for
But
sure. In fact, like, I would be remiss not to say that the help slip or fish style prog rock epics that require like more guitar arpeggios than I've ever played in my life are written by the drummer. I think in that band I bring the same thing that I bring everywhere else, which is I show up and I listen and I react. And in that band I also have to learn music.
well, what's funny is that I remember I interviewed Tony Saunders, one of Merle's sons, and in the early '70s he was filling in for John Kahn when Kahn was doing Brewer and Shipley dates in Colorado or whatever, and
Yep, yep.
Kreutzmann would be on some of the drums. But he said that him and his dad used to play this place in San Francisco called the Sand Dunes. And after a gig with Garcia would just show up with his amp and guitar and play, and they were playing like kind of like Return to Forever stuff. And they
Cool.
kind of got there sometimes, but it's a similar sort of, I don't want to say garage band attitude, but you're bringing all the aesthetics to the bandstand. And I mean, so you're playing the guitar in the moment, you're flowing. Do you even, how do you even know that you hit a clam? Because quite frankly, because I mean, in a band like Taper's Choice, because I hung with the percussionist last Friday. He played drums at the gig I was at, and he percussionist. He said he went to your gig. He's like David Harrington, and I was like, wait a minute, Dave Harrington. He's a bass because I was the only time I've ever seen you was playing bass with Russo and Deutsch, Hooter rolling around,
Oh,
and
right. Yeah.
and
Joe, Joe
so
was the last guy who ever called me to play bass.
it's so sick because, dude, your bass playing blew me. It was. I have some sick videos I'll send you. You're gonna be dying of laughter. But I was like, he's a
That's
bass
cool.
player, and this guy's like, no, man, he plays guitar in this band, Taper's Choice, and I was blown away. And like,
Oh,
I was like, dude,
cool.
you are my new fucking band, dude. So like that, it was so sick. But I mean, I just want you to talk about the idea of, because Miles would say it. I mean, Sanborn, the late great Sanborn, was like, I shouldn't have played that note. Miles is like, yeah, you should have played it twice. And it's like if everybody goes with you, then it's not a clan. And so
Yeah, I mean,
like,
I completely subscribe to that philosophy, and it's a technical distinction, but like Taper's Choice operates in kind of two gears, and one is searching, and one is execution. And when we're in the execution phase, we're playing stuff that sounds like yes, basically. And so, so when we're doing when we're doing the through composed, like there's a couple of tunes where it's like there's about to be 6 minutes of through composed music, and then we drop the net and we see where it takes us.
oh my
Then
God. Yeah.
you know during the 6 minutes, I know when I hit a fucking clam. But then
Yeah, right.
But when we're in the jam, it's never like that. And everyone in the band is totally responsive and and we all elbow each other and push and nudge and try to see where it goes and takes us. And Zach Tenorio, who's a keyboard player, is like a polyharmonic genius, and so like he's the king of recontextualization. Like I know
Jesus.
that the first time
Jesus.
I play one note that's like a little bit left of wherever we are, he'll hear it, he won't miss it, and then if I do it again, then he will change the music.
He'll put a chord on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dude, that's like Brent and Jerry, dude. Like 83, it's like right
Yeah.
there. It's unbelievable, man.
Yeah.
I mean, there's room for it all, Harrington. And I just wonder if you could talk about your approach to the idea of, you're in, because I think Taper's Choice has an angle. They're coming. Do you guys play like half originals, half dead covers, or how does it work?
We don't do any dead covers. We just borrow from the approach and the lineage. We only do our tunes. There have been
Holy
maybe two
shit.
times where we've thrown in the occasional cover. Like we played a gig on March 11th once, so we covered "Who's Got the Herb" by 311. Does that
Yeah,
count?
right. Dude, that was one of my favorite bands. Yo, honestly, so you're playing Garcia. It's like a Legion of Mary gig or something. I mean, you're not playing any dead music. It's so great.
Yeah,
So,
it's we go
yeah,
out.
would you say that have you like in your career? I mean, you've done a lot of producing, and like I saw you on a one-off kind of gig, and you guys like it was so raw and nasty, and like all the cats were just like it was. Bogey was on that gig, and
Yeah.
Goldberger was on that gig. It was sick. Um, how this whatever is left of the music racket, the pigeonholing is relentless, and I just wonder how you've been able to be a chameleon and how you've been able to evade being pigeonholed.
Well, I think I'm kind of like I guess
You know what?
relentless.
Here's what I'm trying to say. Like, because the Taper's Choice, they're like all of a sudden, like people that don't know, they're going to say, "Oh, it's a jam band," but I don't really think it's a jam band.
Well, it's kind of like a Rorschach test in that regard. Then
Wow. Yeah. I mean, they label that, and then people get this perception in their head of what they think it is, when in reality, this is kind of like uh conceptual musical follow through.
For sure. And I think it's the same way that like my band Dark Side is quote unquote an electronic band,
Right.
but that's more because of the tools that we use than the music we make. And I think you could say the same thing about Tapers. I think we use the structures and the book of jam band, and then we do whatever we're gonna do when it happens. And as far as being a chameleon, I think you know, I made a decision at some point that I was going to prioritize playing music I cared about with people I liked,
Hmm.
and that I would let the rest of it figure itself out. And sometimes I have a plan about, I'll make a record or I'll curate a band to play a show, and then I'll kind of have an idea about what it's going to be. But the the loose grip and the soft touch is generally what I've come to favor in terms of my approach. And I think like I get bored doing the same thing, like right now I reconfigured my studio setup here and set up like a mess of cables so that I could make a kind of weird electronic dub for a while, because I was just really listening to a lot of King Tubby with my 2-year-old and thinking about these drum machines I hadn't used in a while. And so I'm doing that right now. And when I had the idea that that would be interesting for me, I figured I'd put a little time into it and see where it takes me. Um, so yeah, I mean, I think like I think a lot of my heroes, I think about like someone like Rebo,
Hmm. Yeah.
who is one of my favorite musicians and musical thinkers of all time, let alone guitar players. And he had like a dalliance with Cuban music when he had the Cubanos Postizos band for a number of years.
Hmm.
And it was like something he did. And then he kind of stopped doing it. And then he started Ceramic Dog, which became one of my other favorite bands with Shazad and Chess Smith. And like, I think that like the change of scene is always something that's exciting to me. I don't I think part of it is like being fundamentally on some level a jazz musician, but like not really playing jazz in the genre way, and being interested in lots of different sounds. I just kind of I prefer to not get bored.
Well, I also want to ask you a couple things. You seem like I just was transcribing an interview I did a while ago with an amazing upright player, Putter Smith, and he was like, Picasso said his quote was like, inspiration is can happen and it's real, but you have to be working for it to happen. And I feel like, do you feel like you do enough live gigs with people you love uh, on the bandstand with music you get off on that gives you enough inspiration in other moments to be able to pivot into different things? Because the fact that you're not bored means that you're inspired and you're not just like geeking out in your room, like you're doing this on the side, but how much are you able to you're conscious of that balance of bandstand versus experimentation in order to keep the fire burning?
For sure. I mean, I think I don't know if it sounds precious or cliche, but I do think that like for me, playing shows is a practice. It's part of the thing. It's and that doesn't mean like, you know, that doesn't mean like a big room dark side tour or like a organized Taper's Choice endeavor. That's like, one of my favorite gigs to play right now is at the bar in Atwater Village that I can walk to from my house.
Ah, so
And
sick.
I've been
I'm
playing
coming to
there.
that. I'm coming to that. Is that a weekly gig?
I'm doing monthly starting in August.
Dude,
I
I'm
took a
definitely hit. That's the gig I'm coming to see Harrington.
and I've
No,
been
but then we
doing.
could talk about the like the community aspect, like why it's so mellow, it's so relaxing, it makes you feel good.
Yeah, I mean it's just like you know, every sometimes like a band, I have very few bands that play organized music. I mean, so for things like that, it's like, I have like a regular trio, collaborative trio. We play free with this great bass player, Billy Moeller, incredible
Hey,
bass player, and Jay Belrose, fantastic
yeah.
drummer. Jay Belrose, you might know him from such films as the Robert Plant Show and the Jeff Parker Band and a million other things. Um, but
But you're playing strictly off sound. I mean, you're
yeah,
reacting to the first sound you hear.
we just play free, and we
Yep.
started playing there, and that became that kind of. And we were playing at ETA before it closed, which is another Los Angeles place that was like a bastion of free music and jazz, um, and sometimes something like that will stick, and we'll be like, oh, like this is a trio, and then other times people are on tour or people are busy or oh shit, I got a gig on the West Side or whatever, and something will shift, and I'll call somebody that I've never played with or somebody will call me to go do their thing with some folks I've never played with. And I think all of those little permutations of the community scene are really what make it feel special. Everyone has their, at least in LA right now, amongst the kind of wider community that I'm a part of, like people have their regular kind of formations and then other things happen and you end up on a thing with a thing and there's like, oh, like I never played with this drummer before, like that was, I think we connected, and then like what, I've got this thing in 3 weeks, do you want to do it with me? And then like that, it's very like kind of old school basic jazz stuff in a way,
I
but
love
the
it.
music that's happening is often, or the music that I'm most involved with is free and takes a lot of different shapes. And I think that part of it, where it's like for me as a transplant from New York, like I spent a lot of time in New York developing that community there, and it was one of the things that I was, sad to leave. That's how I met Joe. That's how I was playing with Ilhan and Kenny Wollesen and Stephen Bernstein and so many of my other heroes I was lucky to play with in New York before I left. And then I got here and I've been here for almost 5 years now. And now I feel like I'm carving out my space and I'm making my friends and I make new friends every month. And that is the practice I think that's at the center of everything else for me because, I don't I think maybe it's a bass player thing, but like I don't love to practice.
Yeah,
But
I
I
don't think Dan
love
Horn practices much either, actually. I mean, yeah, go. I mean, like, no, I don't know what. I mean, it's so like. Go ahead, continue.
No, I think like as a bass player, like that I think I developed the muscle that
Uh,
drove me towards wanting to get people together and play together.
right.
And that's when the bass comes alive. And so I think a part of my brain is just permanently hardwired that way, where like, if I haven't played in a couple of days, I'll crack open the real book and I'll sit with my guitar and I'll run through a few things and make sure I still know where all the notes are. But like the things that I'm doing on a regular basis are designed to get me in a room playing music with other people. Left to my own devices here, you know, I
All bets are off. No, I dig, man. I
yeah,
love it.
I work. I get calls to mix and master other people's records, and I do scoring shit, and I make dub. But then, like, when I'm scheming on my phone on the side of my desk all day is like, oh, I think there's a gig here, there. Should we do a session? Blah blah blah. Like, do you want
Oh,
to
I
come over
love
on
it.
Thursday?
I mean, it's good. And actually, I want to read you this quote and then get your feedback on it, especially putting on your upright bass hat. This is from an interview I did with Larry Taylor, who was the bass player, among other things, in Canned Heat, and he's rest in peace. He said, I was talking to Jimmy Haslip, and he was very influenced by Jocko. But if you go hear him play, he's still got a sense of the instrument because he played a lot of gigs. I was talking to him about learning lines of particular tunes just so you had the thing in your head. A song like Freedom Jazz Dance. Learning it on the bass and then trying to improvise in the tune, which is actually a modal tune. He said that was very difficult. You get younger bassists today who play blues, but they don't really know about the structure. They sort of play at it, but they don't have the expertise and the chops to do certain things, like on the upright, in a blues sense, using the slap technique. Another thing is the bass lines themselves. They're based off of real simple things, and sometimes it's hard to relay that, how simple it really is, and they overplay mostly. And I wanted you to talk, especially back in the days of shedding on the bass, upright bass, if you had a blues gig that really centered you and to cook the groove and not overplay.
Well, I think maybe it was like part of my early uh disposition against practicing, but like somehow I found my way to like a higher like Jocko-ish level of technique on the electric, and
Right.
like I learned all that shit. Like I learned I could play I could still play Teen Town to this day because I did that 25 years ago.
Hmm.
But on the upright, especially, I think my style was a bit different in that I mean, the upright is like I didn't stick around long enough maybe
Sure.
to pull for that next level of virtuosity on that instrument, but I loved being in the music. And so, there's like I think it might be like Chris Wood of Medeski Martin Wood or someone. I don't know if he was the first. I'm sure he wasn't the first one to say it, but who said that the upright bass is a big drum, and I always kind of looked at it that way, that it was really just part of the groove machine, and that the power. I had a teacher when I was really young, and through high school, this guy Kelvin Bell, who played with Arthur Blythe and all of the M bass guys, and
Yeah, like
all
Henry
kinds.
Grimes and shit. Yeah.
Yeah. And Kelvin taught me, like, he was like, the role of the bass is you play every note you possibly can, as you play every note as low as you possibly can. That's what that instrument is. And I was like, oh, and that really stayed with me. And especially on the upright, like, I always felt like I could push the music, I could exert more like structural change and more excitement through the modulation of groove and harmony rather than through melody, frankly, rather than through the high register technical melodic stuff. And you know bass solos are nice, and some of my closest friends are bass players who play really good bass solos. And now bass solos are different, and those people make like futuristic beat music with bass or ambient music with fretless, and it's like a new level of nice. But you know I even when I was like 16, I felt a little bit of the feeling of like, well, I'm taking this solo at this jazz band concert and people are kind of waiting for it. And it was never the thing that got me personally excited. It was like when the band was playing and you could drop a like a what one might call a fill bomb,
Oh,
inside of a beat
I love the Phil bombs, dude. Jeez. Every
and
day.
change the whole shape of the song.
Right,
You
right, right.
change from the bass can cause like seismic change from the bottom up, and I think that was kind of how I always like to approach the instrument.
Can you go a little bit deeper on this, like this veering towards the harmonic side of the bass versus the melodic side? Like you're talking about like the undulation, the root of it, not going up high on the neck and playing higher notes, and then all of a sudden you sort of run out of language and you have to overplay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm talking about like in when you're in the bass chair, you can recontextualize where everyone else is
Huh.
based on what the fundamental that you put down at the bottom of the frequency range. And that's with great response comes with great responsibility. And I think like that's something that you can use, that I always thought, and that was something I even remember. I mean, I remember doing stuff like that when I was on the Hoon Roll gig with Joe, where like some of those tunes are, you get into the jam and they're modal, that's just gonna
Completely
be.
modal. Complete, dude. Wait till I send you these clips, dude. You're gonna lose your mind, dude. This is like mode. I mean, that was crazy because it was like COVID was already all around us, but the country didn't shut down for like 2 months after that. And so that was like the last live show I saw before the shutdown. And I walked away being like, dude, Harrington blew me. I mean, everybody, I was on Russo's side. So, I mean, it was just, I was getting just polyrhythmic. I was being assaulted polyrhythmically, but I really walked away. I'm like, he's a bass player. And then last Friday, the guy's like, David Harrington, man, sick guitar player. I'm like, guitar player? This is unbelievable, man. So, I mean, like, I remember Garcia saying, they're like, why don't you play pedal steel anymore? This is like, maybe early 80s or, banjo. And he's like, I just found, he's like, you take on too many string instruments and you get real mediocre at all of them. And so you might as well stick to one and make it your strength. And I mean, do you play other instruments live besides the guitar, or I mean, in terms
I
of
mean,
how?
I would if people called me more, I think that, but I think like I'm comfortable with all due respect to Jerry, because it's all respect. I think I've chosen the path more
Yeah.
of Jack of many trades, and I will continue to see if I can master the guitar. But I have a pedal steel here, and I've played it. I don't bring it to
Oh
gigs.
my, we got to get Harrington out on the pedal steel gigs, man.
But every now and then I'll get a call from someone who'll be like, "Hey, I heard you play pedal steel, and it's not a country thing, but we want some of that thing on this record. Could you do something?" And I'm like, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I can do that." Um, yeah, I think that's more my stock and trade is
No, first of
I
all, Garcia would love that attitude because if you could do it, he was talking more about like string. I mean, whatever. The idea is this is what I want to ask Harrington because you've explained your point of view when you play music, but as a producer, what is your concept? I'm a little. I mean, I'm 46, so like I have a nostalgia for a period of time in recording that was way before I was ever born. And part of it, so I had a couple questions for you. In terms of production, ideally, do you try to get everybody to hit at the same time? I mean, obviously, you might have to do some sparks. I mean, not an over reliance on overdubbing. And then the second thing is, I miss room sound. All the records that you probably listened to with Paul Chambers and Jimmy Garrison and Ron Carter. And I mean, if you listen to, I don't care if they were playing electric, the
yeah,
Idris Muhammad records, the room sound made the records. There was good leakage. And I wanted you to riff on mic placement on the drums, good leakage, and how much you would, if you prefer that everybody hit together first, second take, done.
Well, I mean, I've made records kind of, you know, all of those different ways, to be honest. I mean, I was,
Mhm.
you know, when I first started working with Nico before we even had the Dark Side band, he came from like a very in the box place, and we've made music in a lot of different ways since then, and so is he on his own. But his instrument is the laptop in many ways,
Mm.
and he shreds it,
Mhm.
and I learned a lot from him about you know the the creative possibilities of what you can do in Ableton Live in a music production software that don't have to be about like fixing stuff or making it sound better or making it sound crazier. Just being creative in the same kind of way that is like, I mean, in many ways like improvisational, but
Right.
like happening from a in a from a production standpoint. And I think that really, because that was like 2010-ish, and that was really the time that I started thinking about recording in a more intentional way, because I had come from a jazz background up until then, and I was more interested in playing gigs and working on stuff and just playing. And so I think that like that loosened my grip from that well over a decade ago now on um, being too concerned about the way that anything should or shouldn't sound, or what, being open to like, well, what if this thing that we made is actually a sample and it's not a song?
Oh,
Maybe I made this song, but actually the song is just a sample that needs to have another song built around it. Um, and so in the intervening years, I mean, I've made, I can tell you about like the last couple of records I made. I made a record
yeah.
with Max Jaffe, who was our connect.
Thank
And
God, man. I freaking love that cat, man.
I mean, Max is one of the best drummers alive and so fun to play with.
I
And
saw
we
you
moved,
guys played a gig. Like, that's what caught my attention. I'm like, because that now makes all the sense in the world because you're open to playing with all the cats. Because I saw you guys played a gig and I was like, Jaffe and Harrington. I mean, that'd be a mind melting experience.
I mean, I'm very grateful that he separate from me decided to move to LA at almost exactly the same time I did, and we've played here together. We've been able to play here together way more than we ever did in New York, and we're very close, and we play all the time now. And
Oh, it's
you know,
awesome.
he and I made a record with this incredible saxophonist Patrick Shiroishi, and that record was made in a room in a day with no plan and a few edits and some selections and some mixing, and we were all in a room together, and that was it, and that was that record. And
Wow.
I'm really pleased with that record, and because of the way that the three of us all play, it does and doesn't sound like it's one of those records, because I'm using all the electronics with the guitar that I like. Max is using electronics on the drums. There's moments where like Patrick is playing two saxophones at once, but it sounds more like an overdub. And then there's other moments where Patrick is like playing the alto, but also like shaking some bells like away from the mic with his right hand, and like then that seems like it's some kind of weird spatial overdub thing, but it all happened in the room together. Um, and the next record I have coming out at the end of July is my next solo record that I did the initial tracking for in New York. And I did it where I brought in some sketches and some drones and some bits and pieces of things, and then I improvised on top of that with Kenny Wollesen and Spencer Zahn and Sam Gadry, two of my favorite drummers and one of my favorite bass players. And then I worked on that a little bit, and then I had Steve Bernstein come in and write horn arrangements with some of my favorite horn players of all time.
Wow.
And they did a session. And then I did some more stuff on my own, and I kind of built that one up from the ground up. But at every step of the way with that record, there wasn't too much of a plan. There was like, okay, I'm going to trust Bernstein and just see what he writes, and we'll track it, and then we'll see how it goes. And then that changed the next thing I did. So like, I do value the like grabbing of the moment in recording. Like I tend to not really love, and I don't set myself up for scenarios in which I'm like, I gotta get this take just right. Kind of not,
Yeah.
is usually not on the table.
Yeah.
And but that can take a lot of different shapes depending on what the music calls for.
No, but
And it
I want to go back to this thing about the built and what's first of all, what are the two albums called? What's the Jaffe album and what's the one that's coming out?
the Jaffe Shiroishi record is called Speak Moment,
Speak
and
Moment.
that's on AKP. And then my new record is called Skull Dream, and that's the first release on my label, which is called Maximum Overdub.
You know, I want to just talk, put a button on the idea of the Skull Dream. Um, the idea of it keeping it fresh, not necessarily live, but the idea of not micromanaging, that you're bringing people in to create fresh parts. And unless it's, of course, we talked about how great clams are, but unless there's just something horrendous, you're going to basically trust that it's going to fit into the puzzle without losing too much spiritual energy over it.
100%. My dear friend Phil Weinrobe, who produced the record with me and engineered it, used a phrase early on that became the kind of guiding principle of that record, which was, what happens if we draw the target around the arrow?
Yes.
And so every time we did something else to that record, it was like we threw another arrow, and then wherever it landed, we draw the next set of targets around that.
That's going to take me a minute to really sink in. That's deep. So, I mean, you can do it all. I mean, Harrington, I have to ask you if you could talk. I mean, there's just, I think it's really, I think I'm sure without going into specifics that you feel a lot of gratitude. You're a relatively new father. You have the luxury of people calling you, reaching out, creating gigs. You're getting calls to produce and things like that. But just being a rogue journalist and being out on the road with people that are playing spiritual original music, and even cats that have, and the touring circuit that doesn't exist for so many cats, there's just a lot of people, there's a lot of darkness right now. And I was just, I wanted you to talk a little bit about a period of time in your career where you faced adversity and you were scuffling, and how you made it out of it, and how it made you a better person and player.
I mean, I think that I have always tried to play the long game, and I keep telling myself that the, that as long as I'm making music and, there's new shoes and there's food in the fridge, then I'm doing okay. And I,
I dig, man.
but I mean, to be honest, it's like I've always stayed busy because I never quite had a plan for what I was going to do.
Hmm.
And so I've said yes to a lot of stuff over the years, and it's taken me through twists and turns. And, some of it stuck and some of it didn't, but I was busy the whole time. I mean, when this is not a story of adversity, but like as a but like when Dark Side took its hiatus, we had been going really strong and touring a lot, and suddenly I was, for a brief moment in time, I was a guy in this electronic band that people knew about, and then I was getting offers to DJ, and I had never really done that before, but I had started doing it while we were on tour, and then I
Wow. Wow.
spent part of a year, going on tour alone with a laptop and a backpack and DJing. And I did that for a while. And then I,
Yeah, I mean, dude, that's exactly perfect story, because it didn't it wasn't beneath you. It was just, this is the new door that is opening. I can choose to walk through it. I'm going to walk through it. I mean, that speaks to a high vibration. Do you have a spiritual practice that you cultivate in order to deal with the madness and the noise that just, I mean, I was with my buddy today. He's a good deal older than me. He's like, I don't think it's been this deep, this insane since the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm like, I wasn't even born till '78. So, through it all, do you have I mean, God is sound, connection to source is through sound, but I just wonder about a spiritual practice you might have in order to wash away the dust of everyday life.
I mean, I have an incredible partner who I've been with for a really long time. And after being together for a really long time, one day she asked me if I wanted to get married, and I said that sounds like a great idea. Um, and so I've had her in my life for a very long time, and she gives me a lot of that grounding. And now with the little one, like, that's there too. And that stuff, it can be hard, but it's not ever hard in a way that there isn't a other side of a coin that's like it's beautiful when she's teaching me stuff and like this is what's happening right now. I I think my spiritual practices are mostly like making making sure that amidst all the other work that goes into being a musician these days, I make time to play free jazz gigs at my local bar. And
Dude, I need to know that's starting in August. It's gonna be monthly or weekly.
I'm gonna do the first Monday of every month for as long as they'll let me.
Oh my God, dude, that is gonna be the sickest gig ever. Playing to the moon, man. No, but I
But
mean, so I mean,
I
I
really
no, I get.
I
Go
know
ahead,
it
go ahead.
sounds like I'm evading, but yeah, I
And no,
mean I like
listen, Harrington. I mean, if it does, I mean, listen, like I mean, you're not an elder. It's just, it's not. I mean, Steve Gadd, he went there. He had a real deep. I mean, he was the number one studio drummer in New York. He was all fucked up on cocaine, and he lost his marriage. He lost his kids. He had to go away to rehab. He could have lost everything. He had friends in the business. So some people, I mean, Pat Martino, he had the tumor, and when they operated on him and he came out of it, there were all these guitars on the wall, and he didn't know what they were there for, and he had to relearn the guitar, and to me, like adversity builds your life story. I mean, and that I guess that maybe the better question is, do you relish adversity?
well, I mean,
Or do you not look at it like that? Like to me, a challenge is always a good thing. I guess the larger point is I worry a lot about the health of the live touring circuit in this country, and not just that, collectively, the community that you're a part of in LA. That I mean, I'm from Long Island, but I moved to Tucson, and then cosmically have connected with the people I feel very close to are the West Coast cats, and it's just like I don't know, man. In some ways, it feels like there's an atrophying in terms of uh, whatever. I just want to continue my show until cats actually get paid for the gig, that they don't have to bring a merch table to me. There's a lot of it's pretty medieval, and I just think I would love to get some words to wisdom, or some inspiration from you about the light that you try to focus on, and what your advice would be to people that are not as vibing so hot.
I mean, I think the only thing you can do is try to stick around as long as you can.
Huh.
And um and be a good hang. If you want if the question is advice, then like
I
uh
agree, man. No, dude, that you want a good player, but you want a good hang. You need somebody that's going to be a team player.
yeah, and don't get me wrong, like it would be great to make more money from playing free music, but I made a choice at some point in my life that I was gonna do other things in the music industry to make a living, and part of that is the maybe my bass player mentality or something, but like I love being in the music, and I can make time in my day to do any number of things to keep stuff afloat so that I can play the creative music I want to. And you know if I could have, Ribot's career or Frizzell's career and people just called me just to play the guitar all day long, then, and that could still happen, then I wouldn't say no. But I personally have made choices along the way where I was just like, I'm okay saying yes to all kinds of things. Also, because I guess the only true advice that I could ever give that I really believe in that is like, you know, when you say yes to something, you don't know where it's going to take you. And when you say no to something, it's then that that channel is closed. And it's very obvious, but like it's any bit of good luck or good fortune or cool things that I've been able to be a part of have without a doubt been the result of a series of small events that started from me saying yes to something that was not glamorous, and not well paying.
Can you give an example?
I mean, I ended up in the band that I'm in because in Dark Side because a friend of mine who was a grad student told me that he knew this kid who was super young who played the sax and he thought that I'd like him. And he's like, but he's really just a kid. But like you should meet him, you should hang out with him, you should play with him. And I became friends with that kid and he became one of my best friends. And we played in a college band. And then he recommended me for my first gig playing guitar because he knew I kind of played guitar, but I'd only ever played bass with him. And that's my friend Will Epstein, who is
Wow.
still one of my best friends to this day. And and then I was like, okay. And he's like, but you got to drive to Providence because this guy Nicholas, he's still in school, and so you got to come jam in Providence. And I was like, okay. And so I got on the Amtrak actually, and like rode up to Providence with a pedal board I cobbled together, having not played guitar with other people ever. And then I did a jam, and then 6 months later, I was on tour in Europe. And
Wow.
then
Wow.
2 years
Wow.
after that, we were on tour in Europe again. And then 12 years after that, you know, I'm going to Europe in October to go play shows with my band. I mean,
Was
that's how
this, I'm sorry,
that's how
this, yeah. Were you at Brown at this time or not? You hadn't gone to college yet, or what? You were taking the
I had
Amtrak from
already
what?
I had already graduated from
That
college,
is so tripped out, man.
I was living in Providence, and Providence was still pleasantly cheap then, and I was getting by teaching private lessons at a fancy private school. And then that's when I became friends with some of these guys. And then I moved to New York and I didn't know what I was doing. I was doing a million different things. And then my friend was like, "Ah, sorry, man, you got to come back up to Providence. I really think you should do this thing." And I was like, okay.
Dude, that is, first of all, so last question for you in set one. We definitely have to do set two, but I wanted to ask you if you could talk about the vibe, the difference between the East Coast music scene, especially that New York scene that you were enthralled with, became a part of, and now the community and the vibe of the West Coast, Southern California specifically. Although I guess Taper's Choice is a Bay Area thing. So just West Coast, East Coast. What do you say?
Well, I still feel like I'm kind of new guy in town here, even though I've been here for, almost 5 years, but some of that was pandemic years. Some of that was having a very small child suddenly living in my home with me. But but that's not to say I don't feel like I'm part of a community here.
Sure.
So I don't know, speaking to that, I think like
I mean, you go back in time, but you don't have to answer the question. It's just, not that you were even in the jazz scene, but just there was a discernible difference between the West Coast vibe and the East Coast vibe. And I feel like you've kind of been in the musical milieu, and maybe we've just become very homogenized now. But the vibe of the West Coast is kind of intoxicating, wouldn't you say? I mean, the East Coast to me, it's like it's too neurotic. I mean, I love going back and seeing gigs and hanging out for a few days, but like, dude, it's just now it's even crazier. It's like and you go to the West Coast and cats are just they just take you through. Everyone's fair game.
yeah, I mean, I will say I mean, I grew up in the city in New York, and so I like the fact that I left at
Wow, I didn't
all.
know that. Wow, where did you grow up?
I grew up on the Upper West Side, like just
Big,
south
big.
of, yeah.
Wow.
And I still have my Zabar's mug that I drink out of every once.
Me too,
Um,
man.
yeah, I mean, I'm
J-Bar,
nostalgic by nature. I can't do something,
no,
you
dude,
can
you
take.
can't take the soul out. No, that's never gonna change.
But I think like the I never thought I would leave, and then one thing led to another, and I'm happy I did because I found so much community and so much new excitement in the music here. I think like I think I'm kind of like I don't know where I fall generationally in all of this, but like I felt like I was very lucky and grateful that I, you know, hung out enough, pushed enough, like went for it enough in New York that I got to play with a lot of my heroes who were the folks that I would go see when I had a fake ID in high school and I was sneaking into Tonic and New
Beautiful.
Blue,
Yeah.
which became the old knitting factory and like, and then I became, and then Ilhan, who owns New Blue, it became one of my closest collaborators, like, 6 years after I graduated from high school. And so I was like, for me, it's all, I guess I can't speak globally, but personally, I'm like, I was so much a student of that downtown New York scene from a very young age that I was just thrilled that I got to touch it and be a part of it a little bit. And how much it's changed since I left, I can't really say because I've only been back a handful of times. And when I go back, I still see Ilhan, and I still see Kenny Wollison, and I see the cats. Um,
Hmm.
but I think what's going on out here now um, is exciting because there are a lot of I feel like I'm right in the middle of the generation span, like
You're
there's
right in
the
the middle. No, you're right in the sweet spot.
like I could put a band together where there'd be someone who is easily 10 years younger than me and someone who is easily 10 years older than me, but we would all be friends and we would all be people who have played together before. And that to me is like one of the most exciting things about what's going on here right now is that there's a lot of openness, there's a lot of cross-pollination between different strains in somewhere between improvised and electronic and jazz, and it's coming from a lot of different you know generations or micro generations,
Wow.
and everyone is super supportive. And I really don't have any notes. I mean, I feel bad saying it because my heart is in Zabar's, but my body is on the east side of Los Angeles.
I mean,
And my
dude, you can still find some good kosher deli in LA. There's quite a few around
That's
there. I
true.
mean, it's not Zabar's, but yeah, have you, by the way, I just want to be clear. Are you hip to this club slash record store in Pasadena called the Healing Force of the Universe?
Of course. I just played there last week.
Are you kidding me, dude? Because Austin's like I promoted two shows there, and I really want to do something with one of your. I mean, whatever, we can talk about it. But I did a thing with a band called House Band with a bunch of ferocious cats, and then I did
I've
one.
talked to the house band, the Mr. House Band on the internet before. I mean, we even hung
Oh
out.
yeah, no, Fish on Film, yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Brian, no, I mean that's
No, they're
Josh
sick.
Adam, dude. So we had such a ball. We did Gold Diggers and we did Healing Force, and then I did one with Milena Cadiz, great singer. But Austin is such a legend, and I'm like, so you just played there with what outfit? The Free Jazz Band, or?
I played there with Spencer Zahn, who's a great bass player,
I know, no,
and
I've seen, yeah, no, I know him very well.
yeah, and my friend Evan Schornstein, also known as Fote.
I mean, that must have been. I want. We got to get you back there immediately. That's a great little club,
It's one of my favorites. I mean, Austin used to work at my
Club
local.
TG. Yeah, yeah. No, that was. Yeah, he got bounced out of there. Dude.
I've known Austin since his TG days. That's how we met. And now, now he's in Pasadena. And so I make sure to make it. I always make I hope to make at least a monthly pilgrimage to Pasadena to go visit the Healing Force.
Dave Harrington, man, I feel like I've known you forever, man. Thank you so much for your contributions um, to American music and the world, and also just your curiosity. I think Herbie said that recently. It's just like you got to stay curious. And I think what you were saying before about if you say yes to something, you can say yes to something or say no to something. But if you're going to say yes to something, give it all you got. Give it
For
everything
sure.
you have. Don't half-ass that because you don't know what's going to happen. And And yeah, let's stay in touch and do set two. And I mean, first week of August, dude, we're gonna be rocking that free jet. I'm gonna be taking you guys out to the moon, dude.
All right, I'm down. I'm there. I'm here for it.
Yeah, baby. Much love, dude. Great to talk to you, man.
Likewise. Really lovely, man. Thank you so much.
Bless you, brother. Be cool.
All right, I'll be talking to you.
Absolutely, man.
Bye.
Peace. Peace.